In a city where wealth could buy almost anything, Ethan Harris longed for something money couldn't touch: truth. Tired of masks and shallow affections, he devised a plan that would strip away appearances and reveal people for who they really were. What he discovered would change his life forever. Hello family, welcome to Folktales by Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Ethan Harris leaned back in the leather chair of his study, the firelight flickering across shelves lined with books and trophies. On the wall above the mantel, a portrait of his late mother seemed to watch him with quiet wisdom. She had raised him on the south side of Atlanta with little more than grit, prayer, and the unshakable belief that kindness mattered more than money. Now, at 40, Ethan had more money than he could ever spend, billions tied up in tech companies, restaurants, and real estate. He had power, influence, and a sprawling estate that could swallow entire city blocks. And yet his chest felt hollow, as if all the riches in the world couldn't fill the quiet loneliness pressing in. He had dated women who seemed to glow like the stars, but too often their affection dimmed the moment they realized his generosity had limits. He had friends who praised him endlessly, only to ask for loans that were never repaid. Ethan had begun to wonder if anyone in his orbit saw him, the man beneath the fortune, or only the balance sheet attached to his name. On the table beside him sat a folded bundle of clothing, worn jeans with frayed knees, a hoodie faded to gray, and sneakers so scuffed they looked rescued from a dumpster. A hat to shadow his face. A plan whispered at the edge of his thoughts. Strip away the suit, the luxury, the billionaire's shine, and step into the skin of someone society often ignores. His butler, Malcolm, walked in quietly, balancing a tray with a glass of bourbon. "You've been in here all evening," Malcolm said, setting it down. "Something on your mind?" Ethan's gaze didn't leave the fire. "I want to know who people are when they think I have nothing to give. No boardrooms, no penthouses, just me. If I walked into the world as a man with empty pockets, who would still treat me with respect?" Malcolm studied him, then the bundle of clothes. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Over the years, he had learned not to question Ethan's strange experiments. Ethan finally stood, the firelight catching the determination in his eyes. "Tomorrow night, I'll go to one of the restaurants. Not as Ethan Harris, billionaire. As a man with nothing. I'll ask for something small, just a meal." He exhaled slowly. "Let's see who shows me kindness." The portrait of his mother seemed to nod in agreement. And with that, the test began. The city at night was a symphony of contradictions. Sirens wailing in the distance, laughter spilling from rooftop lounges, the constant hum of tires against pavement. Ethan Harris blended into it all, wrapped in the anonymity of tattered jeans and a hoodie that smelled faintly of dust. The disguise had been convincing enough when he looked in the mirror, but now, out here among the weekend crowds, he realized just how invisible he had become. People brushed past him without a second glance. Some crossed the street rather than share the same patch of sidewalk. A man carrying shopping bags muttered, "Watch it," when Ethan accidentally brushed his arm. Oddly, it made him feel freer than he had in years. For once, no one was trying to impress him, flatter him, or angle for a business card. To them, he was just another shadow passing through the neon glow. When he reached the Ember House, his steps slowed. The restaurant towered like a beacon on the corner, its windows glowing gold against the night. Couples stepped from polished sedans and luxury SUVs, pausing for photos in the light of the marquee before handing over their keys to sharp-suited valets. The glass doors opened and closed like a heartbeat, releasing the rich perfume of garlic butter, seared meat, and roasted herbs into the street. Ethan's chest tightened as he approached. This was his place, his pride. He had chosen the Ember House carefully, because it was a world built for appearances, where wealth and status weren't just expected, they were assumed. Tonight, he would see how much room compassion had in such a space. The moment he pushed through the door, he felt the shift in the air. The music, a low jazz trio playing near the bar, did not falter, but conversations at the nearest tables dipped for a fraction of a second. People noticed him, even if they pretended not to. A man at the bar raised his brows, clearly wondering how this man had slipped past the velvet gloss of the evening. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, their light catching every polished wine glass and silver fork. Waiters in pressed black uniforms floated between tables, carrying plates of lamb chops and delicate towers of seafood. Every detail of the room sang of luxury, and into that harmony, Ethan's presence was a dissonant note. The hostess, barely out of college by the look of her, was the first to move. She pasted on a polite smile that faltered as she took in his ragged clothes. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice careful. "Do you have a reservation?" Ethan lowered his gaze, letting his voice carry the rasp of exhaustion. "No table. I was just hoping," he paused, as if embarrassed by the need itself. "Maybe someone might be willing to buy me a meal." Her mouth opened, then closed. Training had not prepared her for this. She glanced over his shoulder at the manager, who was already watching, then back at Ethan. Her lips tightened with helplessness. "I'm not sure I can allow." But Ethan had already turned away. He wasn't here to test the staff. They were bound by rules, by policies that kept them employed. His focus was on the people who chose to dine here, who had the freedom to act however they wished. He moved slowly through the dining room, scanning faces. At the center table, a woman glittered like a jewel herself. Chantal, though Ethan did not yet know her name, wore a gown the color of midnight and a necklace that caught every flicker of light. Her laughter rose above the murmur of conversation, bright and sharp, surrounded by friends who echoed her every expression. A single bottle of champagne stood chilling beside them, priced higher than what some families spent in a week. At another table near the window sat a woman in a charcoal blazer, posture sharp, eyes never leaving her phone. Danielle, the attorney, carried herself with the focus of someone who lived and breathed ambition. A steak cooled on her plate, half-touched, as her fingers flew across her screen in urgent bursts. And in the far corner, nearly hidden from sight, sat someone who seemed to belong to a different world entirely. Her uniform, a simple gray maid's dress, was neatly pressed, though her shoulders slumped with fatigue. A small plate of pasta sat before her, half-eaten, as she savored each bite with quiet contentment. She had no champagne, no expensive accessories, no audience. Only herself, and the satisfaction of a modest meal after a long day. Ethan's pulse steadied. 3 women. 3 stories. 3 tests. He drew a slow breath, wiped his palms against the fabric of his jeans, and turned toward the first table. The test was about to begin. Chantal's table sparkled with as much light as the chandelier above it. Every laugh, every flick of her hand seemed rehearsed, as though she were performing for an invisible audience. Her friends, 2 women in gowns nearly as dazzling as hers and a man with cufflinks that flashed when he gestured, hung on her every word. Ethan approached carefully, shoulders slumped, steps uncertain. His disguise made him smaller than he truly was, and he leaned into that vulnerability now. He stopped a polite distance from the table, his eyes lowered to the floor. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice raspy, almost apologetic. I'm sorry to bother you, but I haven't eaten today. Could you maybe spare enough to buy me a meal?" For a second, silence blanketed the table. Then Chantal turned toward him slowly, as though she couldn't quite believe someone like him had dared approach her. Her eyes swept over him from head to toe, ragged jeans, faded hoodie, worn-out sneakers, and her nose wrinkled as if the very sight carried a stench. "Are you serious right now?" she said, her voice loud enough to carry to the next table. Her friends chuckled nervously, waiting to see how she would play this. Ethan's hands twisted together in front of him. "Just something small," he murmured. "Even a sandwich." Chantal cut him off with a sharp laugh. "A sandwich? Baby, this is Ember House, not some corner store. Look around you." She spread her manicured hands at the glowing crystal and polished silverware. "You don't belong here." Her friend leaned in, whispering something that made Chantal throw her head back in laughter. "Lord, somebody let this man in thinking he was about to dine with us." She snapped her fingers at a passing waiter. "Can you please get this out of here? He's ruining the mood." The waiter froze, caught between training and compassion, but before he could respond, Ethan lifted his hands. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Sorry to disturb you." But Chantal wasn't finished. She took a long sip of champagne, then tilted her head with mock sympathy. "You know what your problem is? Laziness. If you had any ambition, you wouldn't be standing here begging." Go get a job instead of harassing people who worked for what they have. Her words landed like stones, but Ethan only nodded once, swallowing the tightness in his throat. He had heard enough. Her friends tittered as he turned away, whispering behind their hands as though they had just watched a circus trick. As Ethan shuffled back into the flow of the dining room, the chandeliers seemed to gleam a little colder, the air a little sharper. He reminded himself why he was here. Not to be believed, not to defend himself, but to see what lay behind the polished masks. Chantal had revealed herself clearly. Now his gaze shifted toward the woman by the window, her eyes still locked on the glowing screen in her hand. Danielle. The attorney. Ethan drew a slow breath, steeling himself for the second test. The glow of the city lights spilled through the tall windows near Danielle's table, painting her face in shifting colors as passing cars slid by outside. She sat alone, her blazer crisp against the back of her chair, her hair pulled neatly into a bun that framed her sharp cheekbones. The untouched steak on her plate was already cooling, juices pooling beneath it, but her fingers tapped furiously across her phone, thumbs dancing to a rhythm of deadlines and opportunity. Ethan hesitated a moment before approaching. If Chantal had been like a stage actress, all sparkle and attention, Danielle was the opposite. Focused, contained, guarded. She gave off the air of a woman who had carved her place in the world through sheer will, and she was determined never to let it slip away. He cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, ma'am." Danielle didn't look up. "1 second," she muttered, eyes narrowing at the screen. She typed another line, then another, then finally placed her phone face down beside the wine glass. Only then did she lift her gaze. Her eyes flicked over Ethan, his hoodie, his scruffy beard, the way he stood hunched near her table. Her jaw tightened. "What do you need?" Ethan swallowed, his voice carrying the same humility he had shown before. "I was hoping, maybe you could help me with something to eat. I haven't had a meal today, and—" Her eyebrows rose. A soft, incredulous laugh slipped from her lips. "You stopped me for that?" I don't mean to intrude," Ethan said quickly. "Even something small would mean a lot." Danielle leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Do you know how hard I've worked to sit here?" she asked, gesturing at the half-eaten steak, the wine, the very air of the restaurant. "Law school. Internships. Nights without sleep. Nobody handed me anything. And you," she shook her head. "You're asking me to pay for your dinner?" Her words weren't cruel in tone, but there was a sharpness beneath them, like a knife's edge hidden in cloth. "I'm just hungry," Ethan murmured. "You think you're the only one?" Danielle shot back. "Life doesn't give handouts. If I gave money to every person who asked, I'd be broke in a week. You want a meal? Get a job. Everyone's hiring these days. Restaurants, delivery, warehouses." She gestured broadly with her hand. "Pick one." For a moment, Ethan stood silently, his gaze resting not on her expression but on the phone beside her plate, its screen lighting up again with another flood of emails. Work, ambition, endless hustle. He recognized it, the hunger to climb, to prove, to be seen. But somewhere in the climb, compassion had been misplaced. "I understand," Ethan said softly. "I didn't mean to trouble you." Danielle sighed, already picking up her phone again, her attention snapping back to the digital battlefield. "Yeah, well, you'll figure it out. Everybody has to." Her eyes dropped back to the glow of the screen, dismissing him completely. Ethan lingered for a beat, the weight of her dismissal pressing against him, then turned away. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. But the hollowness in his chest deepened as he threaded back through the dining room. 2 women, 2 tests, 2 failures. And then his eyes settled on the corner table. The maid in her simple uniform, shoulders tired but eyes soft, savoring her small plate as though it were a feast. Something stirred inside him. The 3rd test would be different. The clinking of glasses and hum of laughter seemed to fade as Ethan's eyes rested on the woman in the corner. She was different from the others. No sequin dress, no glittering jewels, no glow of a phone screen demanding attention. Just a simple gray uniform, neatly pressed but unmistakable in its plainness, and a weary kind of grace in the way she carried herself. Tasha sat with her back straight, though her shoulders sloped with exhaustion. Her dark curls had slipped free from a tie and brushed against her cheeks. In front of her was a modest plate of pasta, half-eaten, and a small glass of water. She twirled a forkful slowly, savoring it, her eyes soft with the quiet joy of finally resting after what had clearly been a long day. Ethan took a breath and approached. This time, his steps felt heavier, almost reluctant. He had been rejected twice already, mocked by one, dismissed by another. A part of him braced for the sting again. But still, he leaned toward her table and spoke softly. "Excuse me, ma'am," he began, his voice low and hesitant. I'm sorry to bother you, but could you spare something? I haven't eaten all day." Tasha's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes lifted to him, dark, alert, cautious at first. She looked him over, taking in the ragged clothes, the way his hands fidgeted nervously, the tired slump of his posture. For a heartbeat, she said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then she glanced at her plate. It wasn't much. She had worked a double shift at the hotel just to afford this small indulgence. One meal out, something better than the sandwiches she usually packed from home. The thought of giving it up entirely made her chest tighten. But when she looked back at Ethan, she didn't see a nuisance. She saw hunger in his eyes, real and raw. She saw someone who might not have eaten in more than a day, someone who wasn't playing for sympathy, but simply asking for a little dignity. Her shoulders softened. "I don't have a lot," she admitted quietly. "But you can share with me." Before Ethan could respond, she slid her plate a few inches closer to him and set her fork down. "Here. Sit." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't mean to take your meal." "You're not taking it," Tasha said, offering a faint, tired smile. "We're sharing. I'll eat less tonight, but it's fine. I've had worse days." Something in her tone, matter of fact, without self-pity, struck Ethan deep. He eased into the chair across from her, his throat tight. "Thank you," he murmured. His hands shook slightly as he picked up the fork she nudged toward him. He twirled a small bite, careful not to take too much. Tasha watched him with quiet eyes, then poured him half her water without saying a word. For a while, they ate in silence, splitting what had once been her single meal. The jazz floated faintly in the background, but around their little table, the world felt still. Finally, Ethan said softly, "You didn't have to do this." Tasha shrugged, taking another modest bite. "Maybe not, but I couldn't sit here eating while someone else was hungry. Doesn't feel right." Ethan's chest ached. For the first time that night, he didn't feel like a beggar. He felt seen. He looked at her carefully, memorizing every detail. The lines of fatigue on her face, the warmth in her eyes, the way kindness radiated from her in small, unassuming gestures. This was the answer he had been searching for. The morning sun spilled through the thin curtains of Tasha's small apartment, painting stripes of light across the worn carpet. She stirred on the couch, where she had dozed off after another late shift. The half-empty coffee cup on her table sat cold beside an unopened envelope of overdue bills. A sharp knock rattled her front door. Tasha frowned, rubbing her eyes. Nobody visited her this early. She tugged on her robe and opened the door a crack, then froze. Parked at the curb was a sleek black sedan, shining like liquid glass in the morning light. A man in a tailored suit stood in the doorway, his expression calm and professional. "Miss Tasha Green?" he asked. Her stomach fluttered. Yes." He handed her an envelope stamped with an elegant crest. "Mr. Harris requests your presence at his residence. A car has been arranged." Tasha blinked at him, then down at the envelope. "Mr. Harris?" She shook her head. You must have the wrong person. I don't know any Mr. Harris." The man gave a small smile. "You will once you meet him. Please pack anything you need. The car will wait." Confused, Tasha closed the door and tore open the envelope. Inside was a heavy cream card, embossed with gold lettering. "Miss Green, I would like to personally thank you for your kindness last night. Please allow me the honor of your company today. Yh." Her breath caught. Last night, the only person she had helped was the homeless man at Ember House. Her fingers tightened around the card. What on earth? The drive felt unreal. Tasha sat stiffly in the back of the car, her hands folded in her lap, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had never ridden in a vehicle so plush, the leather soft and fragrant, the tinted windows muting the world outside. When the sedan finally slowed, her mouth fell open. Before her loomed an estate that looked like something from a movie. gates of wrought iron curling into elegant designs, a sweeping drive lined with manicured hedges, and a mansion rising tall and proud, its white stone gleaming under the sun. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered. The driver opened her door. "This way, Miss Green." Her legs wobbled as she followed him up the steps. The double doors opened silently, revealing a foyer with marble floors, a chandelier the size of her entire living room, and walls lined with art she knew must be worth more than she could imagine. She stood frozen, clutching her worn handbag as though it might anchor her to reality. Then, footsteps echoed across the marble. A man approached, tall, confident, dressed in a tailored navy suit that fit him like a second skin. His beard was neatly trimmed now, his hair styled with precision. But the eyes were the same. Tasha gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. "It's you." The man smiled gently. "Yes, it's me. The one you shared your meal with." Her knees nearly buckled. "But last night you were hungry." His smile widened, touched with something softer. "Not for food. For truth." He extended a hand. "My name is Ethan Harris." The name hit her like a thunderclap. She had seen it before, in news articles, on billboards, whispered on the lips of people at work. Ethan Harris, the billionaire entrepreneur, owner of hotels, restaurants, half the skyline. And now he stood before her, not in rags, but in wealth made flesh. Her voice trembled. Why me?" Ethan's gaze was steady, almost tender. "Because when I had nothing, you were the only one who saw me as a man, not a burden. You didn't turn away. You shared what little you had. And that meant more to me than all the champagne and laughter in that room combined." Tasha's eyes brimmed with disbelief. She shook her head, her words stumbling. I didn't do anything special. I couldn't let someone sit hungry while I ate. And that," Ethan said quietly, "is why you're here." They sat across from each other in a sunlit sitting room, the kind of place Tasha had only seen in magazines. Velvet drapes framed tall windows, and a grand piano rested near the corner, as if waiting for music to fill the silence. A tray of tea and pastries sat untouched between them. Tasha perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her thrift store shoes sinking into the plush carpet. She couldn't stop glancing at the gilded frames on the walls, the polished crystal vases, the sheer immensity of the room. Every detail screamed wealth. It was overwhelming, but nothing unsettled her more than the man sitting across from her. Ethan Harris, the same man she'd watched eat forkfuls of her pasta the night before, looking as tired and ragged as anyone she'd ever passed on the street. Now he was transformed, confidence draped over him like the suit he wore. Yet those same eyes studied her with quiet sincerity. Tasha broke the silence first, her voice hushed. "Why me? Why did you bring me here?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His tone was gentle but firm. "Because you passed a test." Her brow furrowed. "A test?" "Yes." He let out a slow breath. "I've built companies, created jobs, earned more money than I ever imagined. But somewhere along the way, I stopped knowing who was real around me. Everyone smiles, everyone flatters, everyone wants something. I needed to know if kindness still existed when there was nothing to gain." He paused, searching her face. "So, I disguised myself. I went into my own restaurant looking like a man who had nothing. I asked 3 women for help. One mocked me. Another dismissed me. Only one person treated me like a human being." Tasha's chest tightened as the realization sank in. "Me," she whispered. "Yes." Ethan's voice softened. "You, Tasha. With barely enough for yourself, you still chose to share. Not because you thought it would impress anyone. Not because you wanted recognition. Just because it was right." Tasha shook her head, overwhelmed. "But it wasn't anything big. I didn't give you money. I didn't fix your life. I just shared my food. And that," Ethan said, leaning back, "is what made it priceless. Kindness isn't measured in size. It's measured in sincerity. What you gave me was genuine. That's rarer than gold." Her throat tightened, words stumbling. I don't even know what to say. I'm just me. I'm nobody." Ethan's gaze held hers firmly. "You are somebody. Somebody with a heart strong enough to do what others wouldn't. That's why I brought you here. To thank you. To show you that what you did mattered." Tasha sat in stunned silence, her pulse racing. She had no idea what was coming next, but for the first time in a long while, someone made her feel seen. The silence between them lingered until Ethan stood and walked to the tall windows. He looked out at the sprawling gardens beyond the glass, neatly trimmed hedges, fountains spraying arcs of crystal water, a world so carefully ordered it sometimes felt unreal. "I could give you money," he said at last, his voice low but clear. "A check big enough to pay every bill you have, and then some. But money alone won't honor what you gave me." Tasha shifted on the couch, her heart pounding. "I'm not asking for anything. I never was." "I know." He turned back to her, his expression softened by something rare, respect. "That's what makes this different. You gave with no expectation. And that's exactly why I want to give you something real." He stepped closer, his presence commanding yet gentle. "Tasha, I own companies across this city, hospitality, restaurants, real estate. I want to offer you a position, not as charity, but as opportunity. A chance to build the kind of future you deserve." Her lips parted, stunned. "Me? Work for you?" "Yes." He smiled faintly. "You have a strength most people overlook. You kept your dignity, even when life didn't make it easy. People like that are rare. People like that are worth investing in." Tasha's eyes stung, but she blinked the tears back quickly. "I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," Ethan replied simply. "Not because you owe me anything, but because you owe yourself a chance." For a long moment, the only sound was the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Then slowly Tasha nodded. "Yes, I'll try." Relief flickered across Ethan's face, followed by something warmer. He extended his hand, not the hand of a billionaire to a maid, but one human being to another. She placed her hand in his, the contact steadying them both. As they stood there, a quiet understanding settled between them. This wasn't just the end of a strange test. It was the beginning of something new. Not wealth, not pity, not debt. Something built on trust, kindness, and the chance to grow. Ethan glanced once more at her, his smile genuine. "Then, Miss Green," he said softly, "welcome to a new chapter." And for the first time in years, Tasha felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift.